Hi, so in this video we're going to have a little look at, completely from scratch, assuming you know absolutely nothing at all, how to start playing around and coding for websites and how it all works. We're not going to use any tools that people would use in the real world. We're just going to look at the basics of how it all hangs together. And we're going to use JS Fiddle, and we're going to do this so that we can start talking about what we mentioned last time, which was functions. So that's the idea. We're going to learn to go beyond just typing out little equations and seeing how you can add things together and run little loops and things to produce some results automatically. And we're going to look at functions and what part they play in constructing a computer program. First of all, I'm also going to assume you know absolutely nothing about the three things you need to know to make a website. First of all, in JS Fiddle here, I've changed it a little bit. The layout is usually if you go to jsfiddle.net for the first time, you'll see there's some settings here. You can see the classic view and so on. I've changed it to this one just for the video. We've also made it quite big so we can see what's going on. You should have more space to play with. I've written this already, just so you don't have to see me typing this all out. And so we've got something to talk about. This is blank to start with. So first of all, HTML, you've probably heard of that. It's how we arrange things on the page. Then we've got the JavaScript, which we were playing with in the console last time, which is how we do things, how we run the program and make calculations and make changes. And then we've got CSS, which is cascading style sheet, which just means that you're writing styles for the page. And the cascading part just means that they build on top of each other in simple terms. So I'll just talk about the HTML here. We've got HTML, which is the root of the page. That just says this is the page. And inside the page, you have a body. You always have these two things. You can also have a head in here above the body. It's just head and body inside the HTML with all sorts of things in it, but we don't need that now, and we won't talk about that now, so we won't put that in. Inside the body, we've got a div. Now it's just an element that just says it doesn't do anything. It's just this is just a thing on the screen, an element on the page. It is. If you just put a div on there, you won't see anything. It's just empty. No width, no height, nothing. You can classify divs as well. So you could say that. So I was saying this one has the class label. Also, you can make sure that all sorts of divs on the screen could have the class label, and they would all be classified as a label. Then there's nothing special about this label here. You can call it anything you like, but it's obviously sensible to call it something that makes sense in the context of what you're trying to do. Now, you can also have an ID on any element. We've got one on this div, and these are unique. This is saying this is one specific element on the page, and this is what it is. It's the only thing on this page, so I can find it. It's a unique name for that particular element that I can use to find it, or just to highlight that it exists in some way. Inside this div here, we've got just some text there. You could have other elements or text or combinations. It's a tree. It's a hierarchy. It can just go on forever in just adding things inside other things or next to things. When you add things inside things, they're children of the parent. And when you add things next to things, they're siblings. It's just kind of normal relationships there. So that's that. And down here you can see we've got styling. So I've written body here. Now that refers to the element body. There's only one. It's nicely coloured here. You can see it's red, and these are red, so you can see this is body. This means looking for a tag body. Anytime it finds that, it will make the background black. It will align everything inside it. It says text align, but it means everything inside that to the center. And so you can see this is what's going on here. And padding here, 15 pixels. That means just like, and all the content, all the children within this body will be leave a 15 pixel gap before it starts to render. And then we've got this other piece of CSS here, this style. Now we've got dot label. That's because this is a div. So if we put div, it would work. We could style the div, but that would style all the divs. Now we've only got one at the moment, but we will have more. We'll have many divs, and if we put a style on here, it will style all of them. So we've selected. This is a selector. We've selected all the divs on the page, and this is what we want to do with them. So we needed a more specific selector. So we put the class on here, label, as we saw. So a class name is just denoted with a dot at the front. So now we've got a more specific selector here that looks for anything that has the class of label. Now there might be other things. I mean, I might have put label on here for some reason, just as an example I might have. But say we only want divs with the class label. You can start building them up. You can say divs with the class label, like that. That's more specific still. It's always good to be specific when you intend to be. So the label here is color white. I've made the text 24 pixels. That's what that means. And bold. Font weight is bold, so it's a bit bolder. If I take that off, see it's less bold, which is fine. I'll leave it like that. There's all sorts of things you can do here, and that's not really why we're doing this video. We want to learn a bit about functions. We just wanted to lay out the page a bit to show you what's happening here. So you see I just ran that, and it says hello world, and yet it says hi everyone here. So what's going on there? Well, this is because when we've got some code on the in the JavaScript file, it runs straight away. It just runs and does all that. So what it's going to do is get the element by ID on the document. This is just how you find an element in the script. This is just the way you do it. Document dot get element by ID. Could go into so much detail about that, but we don't need to. It's just, this is the way you find an element. So, and its name is output there, because we're finding it by the ID. So that's the ID is output. And then what we're doing is we're saying we'll put that into a variable. Whatever this is giving us, we'll go into here, into a variable called output. And then this word here, const, it just means that once we've set that there to output, we're not allowed to change it anymore. You can't say output equals something else. It just means that you always know that's going to be this. You can't then say, okay, output now equals hello. It won't let you, see? Attempting to override output, which is a constant. If I put var there, that's short for variable. It's a bit long-winded typing variable. It doesn't let you. That's not a thing. So var, then it does let you. And now we've got output being something that might be different and might mean different things. Imagine if we had lots and lots of code and suddenly we kind of lose track of what output might be at any particular point. Anything could come along and change it. So it's the best thing to use for defaults when you know you don't need to change it is to use const. And here we are using the element that's returned by this is an element. So the output isn't a number, it isn't a string of characters like this. It's an element, it's this element here. And in JavaScript, without going into too much detail, the whole page gets turned into a kind of object that JavaScript can explore. It's called the document object model. So it's the takes the document and turns it into a model that JavaScript can use to explore. So we've got all sorts of things we can do with an element, which is part of this model. One of the things we can do is access the inner text within an element there. And we can change it. We can say it equals hello world. So there we go. So that's why it says hello world. If I comment this out, this part here, just like that, it doesn't change, it just stays hi everyone. And of course if I change it to something else, it changes every time we run. Now functions, so what's all that about? So this is a kind of an action. Actually there's two actions here. First of all, we're getting the element. Secondly, we're setting the element. So I mean we could set this all sorts of different times, couldn't we? And it will only show us the last one. But we've replicated this. You see, we've said output dot inner. Every time we've put output dot inner text equals this, equals this, equals this. What a function would allow us to do is this function. We write the keyword function. We could call it what we want to do. So set output text. There we go. And there we put a body after that, just like we did with the loop. And we put that inside instead. Now when we run it, what happens? Nothing. Nothing happens, because this is just a function that's been defined. The only thing that's happened is this has been run, we found the output, put it in there, and then nothing. This is just now something that we can call. This is the definition of it. It doesn't actually run unless we call it. So we've got set output text and we call it like that. We just put these two brackets on the end of this function to call it. There are things you can do with this function, reference to the function, which is this part, other than just call it, but that's how we just call that function. Now we would do that. It's worked again. Now it's not a very useful function. It always sets it to high. So how can we feed in other bits of text to that? Well, that's where we need function parameters. So let's say we'll call a parameter called text, and then we set text to inner text instead. Now if I run this, nothing, it says undefined because we haven't passed the text in. Text is not defined, so it just says undefined. So if we pass some text in, then it works. And you can see we could call this multiple times in different situations to change the text whenever we wanted. You're thinking maybe that should be in there, you see, maybe because we spoke before about the function not relying on things that are outside it in case they changed. What if they changed? That's a good idea. It means that every time you call this function, it looks this up from the page and finds it, which you might think, some people might think, is more work. It does every time, whereas before it's just setting the text. This time it has to find it, then set the text. But you can trust that function more. You can trust that output has already been found. So here we are, you see that this is where we start going into grey areas. On the one hand, you can trust this function more, but on the other, it might take a little bit longer to run. But you have to weigh that up, and I think you should always stay on the side of writing code that you can trust first and that people can understand first. And if you find anything that's slow when you run it, then you can start trying to look into ways of solving that. Don't start with trying to make everything super fast. Try to make everything understandable and robust, and so that it works and you can trust it and it's easy to read. That's much more important. So here we go, we've got set output text, hello world, and it works the same way. It gets the output, but we know it looks the same here, but we know under the hood it's working better. So this is again something we can call from other places, as I mentioned. There's another element we can put on the page, which is a button. I'll do that. It's a tiny little button there. It's got no text in it. You need to put the text in there. Let's call it change text, because that's what I want to do. Let's change text inside the button there. You see it's got some default style on there because we haven't put any styles in here for buttons. It's just got whatever the default is in there. If I click that, it doesn't even look like a button. It's not styled like a button. If that really upsets you, I can do that quickly. All buttons on the page will have the cursor change into a pointer. There you go. Looks a bit better now. Looks more like interactive. So we've got that button, but it doesn't do anything when we click it. How do we do that? On click is an attribute. These are attributes on tags, element tags here. I've spoken about class, an ID. This is another one on click, and its value is something to do when you click the button. And we know exactly what we want to do. We want to call this set output text, and we can change it. Now, I could put hello world in there like that, but you can see all sorts of errors coming up now. You can see, and that's because we've got this opening bracket quote here, and then it closes here. We intended for it to open a new one, but it's actually closing it. That's a string there now. And then we've just got, as far as the computer's concerned, it's random text. It doesn't understand why you're writing this way. You put a string, and now there's all this random text here. So we know what we intend, but that's not what we've written. We've written a string, some random text, and then another string, which just doesn't work. So there's an easy way around this, and that's you can use different types of three different types of quotes you can use. There's the single quotes. Let's try to autocomplete there. And there's also backticks as well, which is next to the 1 on the keyboard. And they're useful for other things later, but you wouldn't usually use them here. So you just be consistent about what you use where. So let's use single quotes for code, and we'll use the double quotes there for all the attributes on the page in the HTML. So let's take this out so we know that it's working. Run that. It says hi everyone still. Click change text and it says hello world. And there you go. So there's a function that we can reuse. So we could put another button on. Just copy that just done. Call it change text again and say again. Now I've got two buttons. Change text, hello world, change text again, and so on, back and forth. And it's reusing this code in a function. So that's one of the other main benefits of a function, as well as defining something that is all of one purpose. You can also reuse that in other ways, and it becomes useful when you pass in parameters to make it do slightly different things every time as required. So there we go. That's just a little introduction to functions. Little overview of the main HTML, CSS, JavaScript elements of creating a website, and we've made a very simple little example there to show you how JavaScript can interact with HTML and CSS can style HTML, and we can find things out about the HTML in the JavaScript and so on. It all links together and they all work together and they all have a particular job to do, which is a great way of putting any kind of code together. You make sure every part has a particular job to do and they all have a way that they communicate with each other, and all the things they're concerned about are separated. So you've got something looking after the page layout, something looking after the styling, something looking out for all the functionality on the page. So there we go. I hope that was helpful. And next time we'll do a video with perhaps a bit more of a real world scenario, because you'd never start coding a page like this. You'd always have a starting point to get you going. There's no point starting completely from scratch every time. And just as a little sneak peek, we can see here we've got no library, which just means this is just pure JavaScript on the page, nothing else, nothing helping us, no other code. This is the only code that's on there. But in here we've got all sorts of libraries that help us. And we're going to look at one of the most popular ones, which is React. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.